Hey, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me. Can I get a thumbs up if you can? Okay, thank you. Good evening and welcome back to Inside Out. I believe we're on day 11. My name is Chi Chi and I'll be your host for this evening's workshop session. So thank you for joining again as we continue these important conversations about mental health, faith, well-being, and community. So just a bit of housekeeping. Today's session is being recorded as usual and it will be on our YouTube playlist. I'll put the playlist link in the chat at some point today, but just a reminder to avoid sharing like sensitive information or anything you wouldn't want up there. Today for journaling, we're on page 22 and 33 of the welcome pack. You can also find out a bit more about our speaker on those pages. Um, she's shared with me quite a few resources for today, so they'll be at the very back of the booklet. So you can see any of the resources or videos that are related to today. We will have a Q&A as usual, so hopefully people are feeling like putting their hand up, which is fine. You can put your hand up if you want to unmute during the Q&A discussion portion, or you can pop it in the chat throughout the talk anonymously to me or just in the general group chat. So without any further delay, we will ask our devotion lead, Douglas, to take it away with our devotion for today. Thank you.
Um, yeah, good evening, everyone. Happy to be here. Thank you, man, Liverpool, for this session. I think it's important to kind of go through these different topics that you've been going through over these past few weeks. I know people will definitely be blessed and just kind of a bit more equipped as well. I think I've learned a lot, especially for the session that I attended a few days ago. So yeah, thank you so much for putting this on and allowing all of us just to be here, just to learn a bit more and just to dive into this important topics, various important topics too. Before we go in, let's have a word of prayer and then we can begin. Heavenly Father, Lord, thanks so much for allowing us to be here. We're asking for Holy Spirit to guide us, lead us in its devotion, but also throughout the whole program this evening. Whatever we're going to talk about, Lord, you've gone before us and you prepare the way. So be with us now. And be with everyone else who's on the way and everyone else who will catch up and follow on from this too. This is I pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. Um, yeah, I'm sure some of you know what the topic is for this afternoon, evening. But I'll be following on from that, this devotion. Um, I'm not sure how many of us here or have worked in the care sector, or have maybe touched that area before. But I've been working in the care sector since 2021. As a support worker or as a residential childcare practitioner, basically in essence, kind of making it very succinct, I'm working with kids who have various needs, who are not in homes, because of various personal difficulties or even parental ones. And while it's a fulfilling role, um, it's also one of major challenges. Each day is never really the same. Something different happens each day, the different triggers that happen, different things happen each day. But for myself, I'm not there 24 hours a day. I'm not there 7 days a week. I spend maybe a day or two because I'm a part-time plus full-time. Either way, I spend about 2, 3 days during the week. After that, I go home and I kind of hand over the responsibilities to other colleagues who kind of carry the weight of the rest of the week. But as I was thinking about this devotion, I was thinking, what about those who are carers 24/7? Caring for children, husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, different people who are in there they need to take care of, who are consistently by someone's side, moment by moment, day by day. This season we're focusing on again mental health, has kind of reminded us that many people are fighting battles that nobody sees, right? And carers often spend their lives pouring out into others while also actually silently carrying emotional, physical, mental, spiritual weights themselves. For those who maybe who know carers or are carer themselves, or have in some capacity maybe are in this field as well, you know that it's not an easy role. But I love what Galatians 6 verse 2 says to us. Kind of like a mandate, kind of definitely a thing we should definitely take on. It says, carry each other's burdens, right? And in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. But why does scripture tell us to carry each other's burdens? Well, for me, I believe it's because this point is even the strong get tired. Even the strong get tired. If we go to Exodus, a story that really kind of, for me, brings this home. Exodus chapter 17, story of Moses. You may have come across it. I'm going to read the text. Exodus chapter 17 from verse 8 to 13. If you have your Bibles, turn there. If you don't, maybe you can listen in, but hopefully you can follow along. Exodus chapter 17 from verse 8 to 13. Um, yeah, my heading is the Amalekites defeated. It says, the Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow, I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands. So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone, put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side, one on the other, so that his hands remained steady till sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. I found this very interesting. We can take a few tips and a few pointers from here on this devotional. When Moses held up his hands, Israel prevailed, right? But eventually, he became exhausted, right? But Aaron and Hur stood right by his side. The Bible tells us that they took a stone and put it under him to support him. They held up each of his arms, one on the one side, the other on the other side. Carers can often be like Moses. They're constantly supporting others, pouring into others, supporting others, right? That was Moses. But Moses had thousands of people under his care, you could say, right? He was carrying a lot of responsibility, the welfare of people. Um, but how often do we think of Moses' state in that responsibility? We speak about Moses being a great leader. We speak about him being this amazing person who led so many people, cared for so many people. But do you often think about what toll that took on him? We don't really get much information about that, but I can imagine it was quite a lot. Day by day by day by day. They were going around how many, 40 years they're going around the wilderness, but that's his responsibility. Day by day by day. He was probably emotionally, physically drained, right? Because it's a lot to carry. Also, Moses carers, they are expected to keep going. Notice how in the text, right? Aaron and Hur did not take the staff that he was holding up from him. They simply helped him carry the load, right? Maybe it wasn't their responsibility. They simply helped him to keep it up. God never intended that this responsibility of being a carer and caring for others to be carried alone. Hence why in Galatians 6 verse 2 we're told to carry each other's burdens. Because God has put a community around us, not only for support, but also for strength, for prayers, to allow us to enable different people who are carrying these burdens to be strengthened and to be enabled in their responsibility. The church and the community were called to carry each other's burdens like Hur and Aaron, offering practical help. Notice it wasn't just, hey, you'll be okay. Don't worry about it. They actually were by his side offering practical help and lifting up not only his arms, but also put a stone, a seat to help with the situation. But for us, also about listening without judgment. It's also about for us, it's about creating a safe space um for this. It's about supporting not only emotionally but also physically and spiritually as well. We see a few things that we can learn from there. But also, we also see in the text is that Aaron and Hur were able to help Moses because they noticed Moses. Moses was clearly struggling. Maybe he wasn't clearly struggling, but the main point is they noticed and they did something. Do we take the time to notice those around us, those in our space, whether that's a church or even outside a church? Do we notice other people in our space and do we choose to step in and to help? Or do we just assume that they are okay? Aaron and Hur took the time to step in to offer practical help and to notice. And Aaron and Hur not only noticed, but they cared enough to do something about what they noticed. And that's also our responsibility. But what I love about God and what I love about um, who He is that even with if other people don't notice, He notices. Matthew 11, verse 28 says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will what? Give you rest," right? God is a God, as we see in even in Genesis, is a God who sees. He sees those who are carrying these loads, who sees those who are carrying this responsibility and this weight. And he says, "Come to me and I will give you rest." But I believe that God has placed other people, as well as kind of touched on different areas throughout this whole mental health section these past few weeks, is that God has also put other people around us to help and to be an assistant for that. But for any of us who may be in this phase or caring for someone and it's difficult, I wanted to kind of leave on this a few promises which I love in scripture. One of them is First Corinthians 15 verse 58, which says that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. Right? Hebrews 6 verse 10 says, God is not unrighteous to forget your work of love and labor shown to him by helping other people. And so oftentimes, as like I mentioned before, I work with kids in care and I do 1 day or 2 days, 3 days, and I am drained. And oftentimes it can seem like but God sees, God understands, and He's there. But also He also asking all of us to help those who are caring, helping other people, to be that support like Aaron and her. But also reminds us that He sees as well, and that as we come to Him, He was also able to give us that rest. And so, even though days get difficult, even though it's tiring and it's exhausting mentally, physically, emotionally, our labor is not in vain. God will give us the strength to keep going day by day. And but let all of us be that people, that person that doesn't only see, but also steps in to help practically. Because it goes such a long way. And so I pray all of us, whether whoever it may be in our lives, in our circle, in our spaces, in our churches, let's offer that help because trust me, it goes a long way. But I pray that we will not only be people who see, but people who actually are willing to engage and to help those who also need help. Because even the strong get tired. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Douglas, for that really thoughtful devotion. It was very timely and very in tune with what we're going to speak about today. I will now introduce tonight's speaker, who is someone who's dedicated many years to advocacy, inclusion, and supporting individuals and families that are living with disabilities. So, today's speaker is Sophia Nicholls, who is a leader, speaker, coach, researcher, and advocate whose work has focused on fostering belonging and inclusion within both communities and church spaces. Driven by her lived experience as a mother and carer to her son Matthew, she
One
co-founded
anyone.
She co-founded ASNA, the Adventist Special Needs Association, with a mission to help individuals and families with diverse needs feel seen, supported, and able to flourish. In tonight's session, which is called The Parent Carer Journey, Sophia will help us explore some of the mental health challenges experienced by carers and families, whilst also reflecting on practical ways churches and communities can offer meaningful support and understanding. So please join me in welcoming Sophia.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Can I just check that you can see my screen?
Yeah.
I think I need to now put it on presentation mode. There we go. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see.
Excellent. All right. Now, I just want to say at the very beginning, firstly, all I can see on my screen is my presentation. It's the way that it's presenting itself. So unfortunately, I can't see you, which I feel very sad about, but I would love to interact with you. So occasionally during the session, I might ask you to put some things in the chat or maybe just raise your hand or say something just to keep the engagement going. So if I do that, please, I'd love to encourage you to take part. During my presentation, a very small part of the presentation, I just wanted to just make give a little warning that there will be some reference to suicide ideation. So just so that you're aware, it doesn't form a major part of the presentation, but I would like you all to be conscious of that. So I think just before we begin, I'm just going to ask if it's okay if we just have a word of prayer. So, Heavenly Father, as we take this opportunity now to just spend a little bit of time talking about the importance of understanding carers and how their lives are affected, and how we as a church can work more towards supporting and providing spaces where people can feel that they belong. I pray these mercies in your name, and that all that we do here would done to your name's honor and your glory. Amen. So, my name is Sophia Nicholls, and I remember very, very well. The day, in fact, it was just a couple of days ago, I was married, 17th of May, 1992. Wonderful day it was. And within about 5 years of our marriage, we had our first child. I remember lying in a bath of water, because it was a water birth, lifting him up out of the water and looking at his eyes and saying to the midwife, "Is there something wrong with his eyes?" And she said, "Oh no, everything is okay." But within a couple of days, we were escorted to Great Ormond Street. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Great Ormond Street. Does anybody know or heard of Great Ormond Street? If you've heard about Great Ormond Street, put a number 1 in the chat. And I'm going to ask you, Chiji, if you can just read out if there are any ones that come out in the chat. But this is a
Yeah,
hospital. Great. There are a few?
we've got
Excellent.
2 ones,
Oh, quite a
three
few of them.
ones. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Good, good. So this is a hospital that is designed to support families or support people generally that have children with special needs, disabilities. And we didn't actually realize at the time that our son had a condition called Peter's anomaly. Now, this is a condition that affects 1 in 100,000 people. And the way that it presented was because it was a defect of the eye. So, in fact, he had 2 conditions, one called anophthalmia, that means no eye. And then the other one is microphthalmia, that means a very small eye. And the very small eye had this Peter's anomaly. And the consultant expressed to us that the way that he would be able to see, shall we say, or at least get some engagement with our world was that if we were to close our eyes and look at a light and then move our hand in front of our eyes, we would sort of see shadows. And he said that would be what Matthew would see. And to be honest with you, that was quite encouraging for me because at least he wouldn't be in utter darkness and he'd be able to navigate himself around the world. And in fact, even to today, if he passes if he's walking along and there is a vehicle or some big structure near to him, he'll reach out for it because, of course, the light is blocked, shall we say? Some of the light is blocked, and he therefore knows that there's an object there. But as he got older, we found that he wasn't keeping up with his milestones. In fact, he was speaking, but then he lost the speech. He started to repeat words till eventually there was no speech at all. And I think by the age of about maybe just before 2, he was diagnosed to have a condition called autism. And along with that, severe learning difficulties. As he grew older, we recognized that, in fact, this was something that was a challenge for him. And he also had something called sensory processing disorders. And this really caused our son, his name was Matthew, to really struggle to be in the world. One of the things that he particularly found very difficult was being in spaces where there was a lot of noise. And this was associated with the sensory processing disorder. He would put his fingers in his ears, or he would really rock, or he would bite his hand. All of these things really that, in a way, he was trying to self-regulate, trying to make sense of the world that he was in. But this was very difficult for him. And you can appreciate it must have been very difficult for us as our first son, the first grandchild, the first nephew, the first everything, not knowing or having a child before. It was very much a challenge for us at the very beginning. And I remember actually the very first day, the day that a letter came to our house, and the letter um, really was just a certificate to say that Matthew Nicholls, our first son, was blind. So it was a letter of registration. He was registered blind. And this was about 3, maybe 4 months into his birth. And I realized actually at that time that I hadn't cried, because all I did was I burst out crying at that time, realizing that my son Matthew was going to be in a world that was different to mine, not only because of his blindness, but also the way that he engaged with the world. And this was a very difficult thing for us to appreciate. I think for us, the greatest concern, I think, for both of us as a couple, the other gentleman is Nigel, was the fact that we knew that Matthew was going to be growing up in a world where people like Matthew actually experience a lot of exclusion. It was going to be difficult for him, and it definitely was difficult for us as carers. We had another son. His name is Christopher James, CJ. And as CJ got older, we realized that not only were we having to care for Matthew, which we did with love and attention, but also having a younger brother. He was also, we would say, a young carer as well. It was very difficult for us to take holidays, for example, because everything had to center around Matthew because of his disabilities. And what I should say is he got older. By about age 11, he then lost the ability to walk. We didn't know why. There was no explanation, but he was therefore using a wheelchair for a good couple of years. So that limited some of the things that we could do as a family. And in fact, as I said, our life was centered around Matthew. But as a young carer, we were very consciously aware that we didn't want his brother to feel any sense of, I suppose, annoyance that he wasn't also being cared for, because a lot of attention was on Matthew. So we would take every single year, without a doubt, maybe twice a year, we would take just Christopher James or CJ away on holiday so that he was able to experience life without his brother, because everything was centered around him, to give him his attention so that he didn't feel that he was being neglected. And this is something that you'll find a lot of young carers experience. But I tell you all of this really to just explain to you that as carers, we decided that I'm just going to take it into the church just quickly. We were finding it very difficult within our church environment to see other families that looked like our family. In fact, we thought we were the only family. And as a result of that, and I think I've shared quite a few of resources with Chi, we started the Adventist Special Needs Association. And this association does two main things. One, it provides training and awareness in churches to enable leaders and church members to be able to recognize the importance of creating places of belonging for people with disabilities, because many of them are excluded. And the other thing that it does, it provides a lot of support for families. So residential breaks, carers days, one-to-one support, because we recognize that it's very difficult. And sometimes when you feel you're on your own, that can be in itself the greatest stressor. So we, through our charity, have met a lot of carers. We had our own experience, but we also have met a lot of carers. And during this presentation, I'll be sharing some of those experiences with you. So before I go any further, I wanted to ask another question. Is there anybody in this room today that is a carer? Are you caring for a son or a daughter with special needs? Are you caring for a spouse that might have dementia or some other condition, or someone who maybe has a long-term illness? If you are, just put a number 4 in the chat, please. A number 4, and Chi will tell me if there are any. So I mentioned as well that Matthew had sensory processing disorders, and this exhibited, the way that it exhibited, especially in the church, was that if we went into a church space, he would make quite a lot of noise because, well, he would hear noise, but he would also make quite a lot of noise to try to, in a sense, to block this noise out. And this obviously was a challenge for the church members because people would often look around and tut. And so, in fact, what eventually happened in our church was my husband and I would take it in turns to go to church. Sometimes he would go and I would stay home with Matthew and vice versa. And I stayed home mostly with him. But it really was a challenge for us as a family. And I think for us as well, it wasn't until I remember it was probably about a year into having Matthew, and a lot of the challenges that we experienced, and we'll talk about those later on, did actually take a toll. But it was seeing a poem that was sent to me by a friend, which really changed my perspective as a carer. I'll be talking about these things later on during the presentation. I particularly want to center some time on what I call the 5 stages to acceptance. But this poem, I think, really was something that I'd like to read it at this stage to give you a sense that actually it has been and continues to be a journey. But this poem was what really helped bring things into a better perspective. So I'm just going to read it to you now. So it's called Welcome to Holland. It says, I'm often asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability, to try to help people who have not shared that unique experience to understand it, to imagine how it would feel. It's like this. He says, when you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and make your wonderful plans, the Colosseum, the Michelangelo, the gondoliers in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives and you pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands and the flight attendant comes in and says, Welcome to Holland. Holland, you say? What do you mean Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life I've dreamed about going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan. You've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence and famine and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and you must buy new guidebooks and you must learn a whole new language and you will meet a whole new group of people you've never ever met before. And it's just a different place. It's a slower pace, mind you, than Italy, maybe less flashier than Italy. But after you've been there for a while and you catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills and Holland has tulips and Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they've had there. And for that, the rest of your life, you will say, or you may say, yes, that's where I was supposed to be. That's what I had planned. And the pain of that may never go away, because the loss of that dream is very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special, the very lovely things about Holland. And after I read that poem, as I said, Matthew's probably coming up to a year or so, it honestly changed my perspective. And I really felt that this was an opportunity for me to really understand, to appreciate. And once we'd started the charity and engaging with more families, it really became more of I suppose, a ministry and a journey. And I just wanted to share, if there were any carers in the room, maybe people who might be listening back to this, the biblical instructions for carers in 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. Just throw them on him and let him carry your burdens. And the word cast there literally in Greek means to throw. And there's nothing that we're going through that we cannot cast on the Lord. And Peter wanted them to know that no matter what you're going through, all of your worries and anxieties can be thrown on the Lord because he cares for us. In Psalms 55, verse 22, David encouraged the same type of commitment in Psalms 55 and 22, where he says, cast thy burdens upon the Lord and he shall sustain thee. He shall never suffer the righteous to be moved. So I'm going to go on now to talk a little bit more about carers. And if at any time you have any questions that come to your mind, I think maybe Chi, we can ask people if they want to maybe make a note of them, if you want to put them in the chat. As I said, I will be trying to engage with you during the course of the presentation, but please feel free to make some notes or ask any questions at the end. So, what is a carer? Often called a caregiver. A carer is anyone, including children, referred to as young carers. I mentioned my son before, who looks after a family member, a partner or a friend who needs help because of their illness, their frailty, their disability, a mental health problem, or an addiction and cannot cope without their support. The care that they give is unpaid. So I'm referring now to unpaid carers. And here are some facts that were taken from census 2021. It was the last census, that 5.8 million unpaid carers exist in the UK. That's 4.7 million in England, 627 just over in Scotland, 311,000 in Wales, and 222,000 in Northern Ireland. So 1.7 million people in the UK are providing 50 or more hours of care per week. It's a lot of hours. So the Centre for Care Research found that over the period of from 2010 to 2020, every year 4.3 million people become unpaid carers in the UK, and more than 4 million people left their unpaid caring roles. And this does actually show that caring is dynamic, with people moving in and out of caring roles every year. And they said the average age is between 55 to 59, and I mentioned before, providing 50 hours or more of care. So I'd say that carers wear multiple hats, and at this time I'm going to ask you to engage with me. So what sort of roles do you think that a carer might have, an unpaid carer now, whether you're a parent carer, a spousal carer, a guardian, what sort of roles, what sort of responsibilities do you think they might have? And you can put something in the chat, or you can unmute and say if you feel comfortable doing that. But I would love to hear from you. What sort of things do you feel carers might be expected to do? Okay, Chi, if you can read out.
We've got feeding.
Okay. Yep.
I suppose, depending on the type of care, education as well,
Yes. Good.
washing,
Yes.
assisting with personal hygiene, some of them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think, Gigi, you're absolutely right. Very much depends on the type of needs, of course, because, you may have somebody with a disability who has, very minimal needs by way of personal care, etc., but may need a lot of emotional support, or they may need a lot of education. Anything else coming up in the chat?
Another personal care,
Okay. Okay.
movement.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I've just made a list of a few things that carers may have to be involved with. I put engineer as one of them because I remember when Matthew lost the ability to walk, he was using a wheelchair, and you kind of sometimes have to try and fix aspects of the wheelchair if you can't actually deal with it. There is a lot of mental support. You almost become like a lawyer campaigning for your for statutory requirements. I know this was something that I spent a lot of time doing, especially for his education, trying to make sure that he had the right school that he needed. Obviously, those of you who, 'cause I didn't see anybody who put in the chat that they were carers, but it really can take its toll. Just sometimes they actually used to call parent carers, I don't know if they still do, warrior parents, because you're always having to almost in a sense fight for what you need, and the more you fight the more you get. It really does take its toll. You're a taxi driver because you're going for hospital appointments, you're dealing with a lot of emotional support, you're looking after first, you're kind of clinical support, first aid, emergency care, you're advocating for them, I mean, the list really goes on until you can appreciate it's quite a lot that's involved, and this does take a toll. The physical impact by the International Alliance of Carers organization. This is a global network of carers. And they say that through legislation, policies, or programming, support for the vital role of carers is necessary for sustainable health and social care systems. Although there are invaluable benefits to providing care, and there really are, I feel very blessed to be able to look after Matthew for that number of years. But being an unpaid carer can be a long-term commitment and time-consuming, taking a heavy toll on your health and well-being. And in fact, employers are saying that carers who juggle work and also caring, there is a negative impact on the economy because often they either have to withdraw from work, which was definitely something that I had to do. So my profession earlier on was I had my own private practice as a podiatrist, and I'd be in the middle of surgery, and I would probably get a call from Matthews at the time. He was going to special school to say that, there was an issue. I'd had to leave my work and come and deal with it. And in fact, this got so difficult that I actually gave up that practice. So this is something that really obviously is very true and real. Caring is also seen to influence emotional and mental health, and is a predictor, they say, of poor mental well-being. Half of all carers reported that their mental health had been affected by providing care for another person. This is some facts that have been released by, actually recently, February 2025, Carers UK said that 35% of unpaid carers report their mental health as bad or very bad. Over 57% of carers report feeling overwhelmed often or always, primarily due to an inability to take breaks from their intensive caring roles. And 74% of carers reported living with chronic stress or anxiety, and 40% suffer from clinical depression. And the social impact of caring is also quite an issue. 8 in 10 carers responding to another State of the Carers report, they have stated that they felt lonely or socially isolated because of their caring role. And one of the main reasons, or a few of the reasons for feeling isolated, was not being able to get out of the house much. 55% raising to 64% for those caring for 50 or more hours a week, or not being comfortable talking to friends about caring, or not having time to participate in social activities, or not being able to afford to participate in social activities. So you can imagine all of these things compounding to causing social isolation. Some of the statements that are made by carers are that I feel very much alone. Or spousal carer said, I have little time for friends because of my role. Another parent carer says, I sometimes feel so worn out about sorting everything out for my son that I don't have the energy to have an outside interest. Some of the bigger things are it's not being able to afford or have the time to go out. Also, the inability to relax and not worry about having to go home early because my husband needs me. It's hard to enjoy social activities when you're tired and you're stressed and unable to switch off from caring. You miss activities and eventually people stop asking you. So a study found that emotional and mental health problems are more often associated with caring than physical health problems. And carers are more likely than non-carers to report high levels of psychological distress, which could include anxiety, depression, and loss of confidence and self-esteem. And so this is the one slide that I wanted to share around suicide. The general population suicide ideation is said to affect 1 in 5 people at some point in their lives, but unpaid carers, a recent research report by University of Birmingham identified that up to 36 to 41% of parent carers have experienced suicidal thoughts while navigating their caregiving role. More than 50% of parent carers who experience suicidal thoughts or behaviors never tell anyone. They carry the weight of the world in absolute silence because they fear judgment or worry about who will care for their child if they admit that they are drowning. And I remember actually going to see my doctor at one point this was about 3 years ago. And at this time, my health was actually being affected. And this is the thing with carers, even though you know that there might be something wrong, you take ages before you go because you don't know who's going to look after the person you're caring for. And I remember going to the doctor and he asked me that question. He said, do I ever have suicidal thoughts? And I thought, huh? This was a surprise to me. Why would he ask? I just want to know, why am I, for example, because what actually was happening with me was I'd lost the sense of taste and smell. So I was finding it really difficult when I was eating, and I was finding it, a bit of a challenge really, and it was making me feel very unhappy. But when he asked that question, it made me think actually, why would he ask that question? And I remember coming back and doing some research, and I realized that in fact that medics, doctors specifically, are expected to ask carers whether they have these sort of thoughts because of the risks of because of the challenge that carers experience. I must say I've never had those ideations, but it is something that to be very much aware of. There's also said to be the effects on marriage and relationships. The chronic exhaustion, the financial strain, with 49 of carers having to cut back on essentials, and lack of quality time together turn marriages into co-management teams rather than partnerships. And that's quite important. There was some studies saying that, a lot of marriages break down, 87%. Well, in fact, the research suggested that wasn't quite the right percentage, but there definitely is the impact of having a child or having someone in your family with additional needs. It does actually affect your emotional, mental health, and therefore your relationships. So I found that this experience that I had, and my son now he'll be actually 30 this week. He's a lot older than of course he was when a lot of these experiences at the beginning of his life happened. But during that period, I recognized that there were some experiences that I had, and I created this thing called the 5 A's of the carer's journey, and I've shared it with a number of carers, and they have been able to relate to it. And maybe at the end of it, I might ask if there's any questions anybody has, or if any comments that anybody has, or we can leave it to the Q&A. But I would love to hear from you, see what your thoughts are. So it's called the 5 A's of the carer's journey, and it really just demonstrates what my experience was looking back and reflecting on some of the experiences that I had. So this slide really was just to give a definition of what I referred to as parent carers, what I meant by acceptance and neurodiversity, but don't need to spend too much time on that. So the first A is anger, a stage of anger. And I should say that these stages is not a linear, it doesn't sort of go from one stage to the next to the next. You'll see that it kind of loops back. But this stage is quite a difficult one, a lot of vulnerability. You feel completely out of control. There is a lot of shock, and very much a lot of denial as well. There are feelings of shame and guilt and feeling that there's absolutely no way out. There's nothing else you can do. That's a very difficult position to be in. You kind of think, I remember when Matthew was born, I was thinking, if I could give him one of my eyes so that he could see, there's everything that I tried to do, and it really was quite a difficult stage. So know that you cannot change the situation, maybe sprinkled with guilt and denial. And then the next phase is what I refer to as the anxiety phase. And this can be quite a long phase. It's easy to fall back into this stage as well as you move up, trying to find solutions. You're tired, you're sleep deprived, you have a fear of the future. And I think those two last ones for me were a big deal. I really was obviously sleep deprived because Matthew didn't sleep because he was blind, and I don't know if those of you who are medics may understand about the importance of melatonin. And in the absence of that, it doesn't enable your circadian rhythms to enable you to have patterns of sleeping. So Matthew was awake a lot, and so I was very much sleep deprived, and so you can appreciate that would have had an impact on health. I think, yeah, I can use the word depression. I wasn't consciously aware that I was depressed, but the behaviors that, if I think about back to it, were very much those related to a state of depression. A lot of isolation, exclusion, and sometimes I would say that sometimes you create those because you just don't want anybody around you. You just want to be able to try to deal with everything yourself. And I think that also, as I said before, has a lot to do with your emotional mental state. Lots of hospital appointments, lack of control, and of course you have a tendency to push people away. But I think, for me, the more I was very much about finding information, wanting to find out not only about my son's condition, but also whether there was anybody else around that experienced the experience that I had. Because at the time I wasn't seeing it in the church. I was actually meeting with people outside of the church, but it was something that I felt that I wanted to do, find out more about his condition, find out more about how I could support him. And also meeting other families in similar situation. And I think in that sense, I think things started to get a little bit better. I spoke about the poem. I was meeting people who had gone through it, and therefore the burden was getting a little bit lighter. And I think connections is probably one of the greatest things that families and carers find that really helps them in their journey. Also finding resources to help us, finding that, although it was very difficult finding the right school for him and all of these things, I was being able to, by being in touch with other families and other sort of peer support groups, that things started to get a little bit better. I think also acknowledging, that taking time to find new resources and recognizing that the challenges and finding, recognizing that the challenges exist and that you're not alone in these challenges. Again, more peer support, more networks. Think you start to acknowledge that actually there are opportunities here. And I think for me as well, I tended to find, as well as being able to start to take support, I was also willing to share some of the experiences that I had. And then ultimately, that takes you to a stage of what I refer to as the fifth stage of acceptance. So in this stage, there are lots of resources, there's peer support, there's sharing. The health challenges are addressed, you recognize them, you find a network, and you start a network. But to be frank with you, you don't stay there. You're there quite a lot of the time. And I think for me, starting at the Adventist Special Needs Association has really been a cathartic experience because I'm not only meeting other carers, I'm also being able to share my experiences and being able to be there for other people who have been who are going through it. That really has really helped in my experience as well as helping them. But there are times in your experience where things sort of start to drop back again. It's not a linear stage. One of the things that we were experiencing at the time is one of the key concerns that I had as a parent of my son was, what's going to happen to Matthew when I can't care for him anymore or when I'm no longer here. And so we've spent a lot of time, maybe 2, 3, 4 years, trying to ensure that he has a circle of support around him and that he has his own place and that people can support him. And we managed to do that in 2020. But just recently, that was all sort of falling to pieces. And you can imagine that brought me back to a state of anxiety. But being surrounded by people who love care and there's a lot of information out there, it really is very helpful. But just to be aware, I think really that this is not a stage that, people just go from one to this to that. You can sometimes go back. And I think it's important. I normally like to share this, especially in presentations like this, because I sometimes find if I'm taking a program in a church around this particular topic, people will often say, that they try to support the carers, but actually, that they're either, not coming up, not taking the support that's being offered. And it depends really on where that carer might be in the stage of their journey. It might be that they're in an anxiety phase or anger, and they just, don't really want support, or they don't believe that support is really there, or they might feel guilt, or they might feel ashamed. They might feel sometimes, and this happens, I have heard in some carers say in the church environment that, they can sometimes be made to feel, I'm sure it's not intentional, ashamed because, they've told, oh, there must be something that you've done in the past that has caused you to have a child with a disability. So you can appreciate how that must feel, and it might not be environments that you want. If you have enough faith, if you pray hard enough, your son or your child will be healed. And if they're not healed, then that's obviously saying that the child is not healed. So you can appreciate that can be quite a difficult situation to be in. And I refer to that as a church hurt, which can often bring people down. I'm going to put a pause here for a second and just ask if anybody wants to put anything in the chat, or if there's anything that has sort of hit you. You think I would really like to say something at this point. If not, we'll just continue. Chichi, if you could have a look at the chat and see if anybody has anything.
Can I say something?
Absolutely. What's your name? Sorry.
Claudia.
Please go ahead, Claudia.
Yes, I do appreciate the fact that the way, you center around this aspect of care, because when we look into care now, more and more we're noticing that there are more carers, young carers, and I think it's taking a toll at the moment on each and every one. So I'm happy that you were able to take on this challenge and able to put forward something like this to support others so that people can see the impact of carers and the role they play, and as well, what can we do to improve? What can we do to support each other? And let us not take it for granted that what you're doing here is very good, because the percentage show that how this has impacted people. It's really, and it's an increase and a rise right now. And I like the fact when you mention about church, because the church supposed to be our home or a home environment that support each other. And if we can have this type of education, we can able to extend it to others so that we can be more reciprocal and accept people more with these conditions. Because I know we have had, I mean, that's want to say or point or so, but just to mention that we have people with disability already, one family. And I really appreciate how the church accept. First, I think it might have been a bit challenging for everyone because of the noise he make, the song that he make. But after a time, everybody get to understand and accept him. That we never even used to pay attention to the noise anymore. And that's what we want to everybody, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm thankful and grateful for this project that you put towards the disability and the process that you're taking, the time you're taking, because let's not take it for granted. Mental health is so much on the increase. And this can be one aspect that can affect us a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your words. I appreciate you. Chichi, I would love if you could just help me with the timing and making sure that I'm not running over time. But I think how much time do we have left now?
You've got about 30, 40 minutes. You're good for time.
Excellent. Good job.
We do have one more question in the chat. It says, do
Uh-huh.
you think it's best to ask carers if they'd like support and what type of support they'd like, instead of just assuming and offering things?
I love that question. And in fact, I'm hoping I'm going to answer it in the next part of this presentation. And if I don't answer it, please make sure you challenge me at the end, because I think it's a fabulous question. And it's just dawned on me actually that there's another a slide that I could have shared, but let's go through these ones here. Now, this is a little survey that I did from carers within our church, the SDA church community. It was just under 15 carers. So it was a very small survey, but I thought the outcome of it was quite relevant. So, and I'm going to just read through the slides. And as I'm reading, if anything comes up for you as you're hearing it, please make a note and we can talk about it afterwards. So these are experiences of support from the church community for carers. And Sister just recently mentioned that, in her church, there is a lot of support for that family. So this carer says, I believe I found myself in a very fortunate position where my church has a very strong disability team. And the disability team leader and team support myself when I found myself in a crisis. They offered emotional and spiritual support. The leader has since played a very active part in supporting me at review meetings to support my son. The church on the whole are very accepting of those with a disability, and they welcome my son openly, therefore enabling me to enjoy church without the fear of him being judged. Here are some others. This person said, as a global church, I have not received any support or help. However, on a local level, my individual church has provided meals, regular calls. We check on our welfare, visitations, flowers, cards, and generally regular contact. To see how they're doing and if they need any help. And the church has not, another person said, the church has not supported me as a carer. Only 2 individuals give me some support. Another one said, before ASNA, I didn't feel there was any support. I managed my child alone. But ASNA raised awareness in my church and they also provide support. No church from the, not sure what that's supposed to say, but I think it was no support from the church. Sorry about that. I'm not quite sure what I was saying there. But I think this person was saying that as a result of an awareness program, their church became more supportive. Another one said, as a carer, I cannot remember the church ever approaching me to establish whether I require any help or support. For what I understand, the women's ministries is responsible for providing support, yet I've never benefited from any form of support. Another one said, the church has supported me by offering to take my son for days out, supporting with his baptism, including him in the deacons team, and always making sure he's not left alone. His vote is counted, and he participates in communion and other church programs, obviously with support. The church is sensitive to the needs. Oh, that's a repeat. Okay, so what else is going well? Well, one person said, nothing has gone well with the church in terms of support for myself and Ryan. Since I have been at home with him, I have had no official visit from the leadership of the church. Only few people call and come to see me. I'm unable to respond to this question because I do not know this support was available. That's a spouse or a carer says. Now another one says, Asda has helped me to know I'm not alone. Peer support has really helped. The church hold monthly disability sessions for all those with additional needs. These concentrate on the five senses and they involve fun activities such as arts and praise and worship and plays, and they're all very interactive. Another one says, overlooking the disability and treating my son as an individual with capabilities that the church could use. I think they're obviously saying that that's a very positive thing. Another one says, as parents, we've been our children's spokesperson and have worked hard with Aslan to spread awareness, and that has changed the way the church looks at people with disabilities. Unfortunately, the church has listened and acted because any of us could be on the same boat at any time. Question was asked, what could be done to improve? A parent carer says, well, nothing as in terms of the church I attend. However, I'm not sure everyone with a disability who attends other churches may get the wonderful experience from their church like I have. Spousal carer said, I believe the conference needs to have a separate department that solely focuses on the needs of carers in the church. Another parent carer says, well, the lesson study adjustment from the GC, i.e. my son learns via pictures, not words. So the lesson could be printed in pictures. These are just comments that came back for improvements. What could be done better? Things can only be done better if there was a love in the church, one person says. Love for each other. The leadership need to ensure that they are aware of the needs and the situations of others. Another said the church is operating in silos, and if you're not in any of these groups, then you don't matter. The silos need to be broken down. Members need to genuinely care for each other. And the church could look into emotional and mental health of its members, especially carers, as a matter of urgency, more proactive rather than reactive. Take time to check in on carers. So, I mean, these last two slides really were just something that I'd put in there about, as a charity, what we have done to help support carers. We have a regular, what we call Here to Here, monthly online peer support for spiritual, social, mental and emotional support. And I'm talking about ASLA now. We provide carers breaks. This is an annual residential retreats. We have what's called Carers Creative. This is using art, and this is through our Music and Art Academy, where we have creative workshops for carers to be able to look at for social and emotional and mental support and well-being. And we also have one-to-one counselling support and signposting to local churches. So what part can the church leadership and community play in addressing some of these challenges? Okay. These are some of the recommendations to leaders. Provide regular opportunities for raising the awareness of carers for church leadership at all levels, pre and post graduation training, internships, workers' meetings. To have regular, consistent and sustainable support from all members and leadership at the local church level. Also, strategic mapping research to determine current support and to identify where the gaps might be. And I'm hoping, some things might raise in your mind as you're listening to this, and please make a note of them and let's have a conversation afterwards about what you feel these recommendations might be. My recommendation is simply these 5 things. 1, ask. Asking is really key. Because the question that the person asked before was so important, because sometimes we feel that we should provide something and then if it's not accepted, we think, well, what's wrong with that person? We're providing all, but actually sometimes you might be providing something that the person doesn't need. I remember when Matthew was at a really difficult time, I was actually hardly going to church because of the challenges that we were having. And I remember getting a visit from our pastor, and he said to us, I'm coming to visit you. I want to anoint Matthew and anoint. And I said, Pastor, all I really want is a break. That's all I needed. I just needed an opportunity to have a break. So asking is really important. Listen when you after asks, because sometimes you're what you might hear, there may be something a lot deeper going on. So take some time to really listen, create the space for listening, and then provide the support that is asked, if it's possible. I should say at this point that you may not have all the support in your church network. I'm talking now, obviously, about your church setting, but there are organizations around you that can provide support. There's ASDA, of course, but there are other organizations, Carers UK, and some county. I'm not sure what it's like. I should have probably did a bit of research to find out about sort of like the Liverpool area. But there must be, and if anybody does know of any potential care support opportunities, please put them in the chat. I think it would be really helpful for people to know. But if you can provide the support that you can, and we'll talk afterwards about what sort of support you think you might be able to provide. But don't feel that you have to do it alone. There are other organizations around to help and support you as a church entity. Reflect on the support that you've given and check in with the carer regularly to find out not only whether the support that you're giving is appropriate, but also just to check in on them. Because as you remember, that journey that I sort of presented to you earlier plays a major part in their life cycle, the journey. So, just check in regularly. And I have actually come to the end of my presentation. And I hope there's opportunity for us now to have some questions. I feel that there's probably a lot more that I could have covered, but I think I'd love to be able to give more time to communicate with people if that's okay. Is that all right, Chi? I don't know if that would be
That's
appropriate.
perfectly fine. I don't mind.
Good. So yeah, I'd love to see if there's any questions that anybody might have. If there's anything in the chat, or if anybody wants to unmute, how would you like to play?
I have had a few come in through my messages, but I will give people the chance if you do want to put your hand up or unmute or drop any more in the chat. One thing that I wanted to ask is as someone that I work with children in different capacities, so both tutoring outside of church and then I'm in Pathfinders Adventurers, and then sometimes we've had kind of this discussion of what do you do if a parent doesn't disclose
Mm.
anything about their child, but you're kind of noticing a few things where like maybe I should adapt, but
Mm.
because I haven't had specifics, and
Yeah.
also I haven't had necessarily the appropriate training on those specifics, I don't really know how to tailor this to that child.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I mean, I generally give a very a general response because I think there is something here about what talk about the three pillars of engagement with families with additional needs. The three pillars. The first of all, is to recognize that every child is different. I mean, that goes without saying. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes people might feel that, if a child is autistic, that all children with autism are the same. And of course, there's a major difference. And the second pillar is that of relationships. Sometimes it's very difficult for a parent to disclose if we think it's a case of disclosing, or even to relate to you if you just don't understand their world. And I feel that there's something about developing really close relationships with families, giving them an opportunity to therefore for you to get to know them. And I think then potentially there may be some disclosures if that's what we're really talking about. And often I think the answer to how you support some of these children will come from the parent. I don't know if that answered your question, but I think relationships are really key for any form of uh, input, shall we say. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. We kind of have a generic approach in Pathfinders at the moment where it's like just in case, like make your lesson study adaptable. So don't just give them text, give them videos. Don't just give them this, give them activities to try and do that.
Hmm.
But just in the case of like I don't have a better word for it because, for example, like some people feel, with autism, for example, they feel overstimulated with a lot of kids around or a lot of noise, and it's just trying to support them in that way.
Hmm.
And sometimes when you have had conversations with parents about it, sometimes there is an element of, I don't think denial is the right word, but sometimes people are not really open to the conversation in certain
Yeah.
communities.
Yeah, and it's not unusual. Um, I mean, there's probably two things here. One is to just to as I said about developing relationships, to take time to get to know the family. Um, they may be in denial, or they may actually they may know but don't want to, that's what denial is, isn't it? They don't necessarily want to express it. I think one of the key things that I found that helps helps families is putting families in touch with other families that are going through the same situation. And it might not be that they so let me to give an example. There was a family in a church who had a young child who, I mean, it was, for me, it was quite clear that that child had some sort of, or at least autistic tendencies. And I remember speaking to the mum and just saying, have you noticed anything different? And she didn't at first. Says, oh no, this is a normal development, etc. And she didn't actually want to even broach it. But when I told her my story about Matthew, I think she was able to then feel, actually, maybe because my situation was a lot worse, she was then able to maybe talk a bit more about her child, and suggesting that she went and had some support to see if they could identify what some of the challenges might be. So everybody is on a journey, and so therefore some may be in denial for longer than others. But I think when it comes to Pathfinders, I feel, and I don't know if you agree with me or not, but Pathfinders is very cognitively developed.
Yeah.
And depending on your leaders and your counselors, it can be very heavy in writing and learning and what have you.
Hmm.
I feel that there is room for, as you said, adapting the program in such a way that, and you'll find that everybody will benefit, not only children that have that engage with the world in different ways, but you tend to find that if you use more things that use the senses, all the senses more, whether it's using music, whether it's using pictures more, or even using videos more. So children, for example, who might struggle to write or to concentrate, maybe they can demonstrate their understanding by using a video, or even using a song to depict what they're doing. So I think there's a lot in being flexible or creative. So that's the third pillar, recognize diversity, develop relationships, and the third one is just to think outside of the box and be creative in the way that you work in your space. So yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, no, it is. Thank you. It's just like trying to avoid like leaving children behind just because
Absolutely.
of the fact that they learn differently, rather than it's not necessarily, sometimes it comes across to some people, I don't know why, like a lack of intelligence, or like they're being behind, but they just need a different way sometimes
Absolutely.
of doing the same thing. I
Absolutely.
think Sister Claudia, have you something?
You said a few things just now, so I didn't want to chime in, but I just was saying sometimes um, it's different with each and every individual. And sometimes you might mistakenly take behavior pattern as well. Because sometimes if a child don't want to learn, they can present with other signs. So, I mean, it's very difficult and very challenging in terms. Some may have some disability, learning disability, which we may not know or
Mhm.
discover. But these are some things that are hard to challenge at times. But it's just identifying, as sister say, if we have a close connection and able to work with each other, sometimes we can identify some of these things.
Lovely.
Another question that's come in is, what can you do if you're supporting a parent carer, but you're starting to get burnt out or overwhelmed, considering you're a primary source of help?
Excellent question. So is this in the church environment or just generally? What is the context of that?
I am not sure.
Okay. I mean, I think
Mm.
I think you're absolutely right. There is something about you know, we talk a lot about self-care. We talk about carers self-caring. I think even those who are caring for carers, they also need to self-care. And I want to make sure that I understand the question. So the question is, you know, how do we avoid burnout when we are looking after? Are we talking about the carer or the person that is supporting the carer?
The person supporting the carer is starting to feel burnt out and overwhelmed.
Exactly, yeah. So I think that I'm not suggesting that in any shape or form that you withdraw, but I think you need to have your boundaries as well. And I think sometimes we kind of some of us can be very empathetic and take on other people's burdens, and that can obviously affect you. So there's something about self-care, looking after yourself. You've heard the statements that you can't give from an empty cup. If you're obviously burnt out, then you can't really support that person, and you're not looking after yourself. So I think there is something very much about recognizing that, and maybe also there's something around creating circles of support. Are there others in that network that you could introduce to help that care in some way? I always encourage carers to seek out, like a homing pigeon, seek out support groups, because that's really where a lot of support happens. And that's a team of you, it's not just one person. So I think there is something about being mindful, having your boundaries, and recognizing as well that there's only so much that you can do. And in fact, sometimes when you realize that you're getting burnt out, you can actually be more of a can sometimes be a hindrance yourself, because your behaviors might change and you start to also regret that you're doing it. So take time to look after yourself. Hope that's helpful.
Next question is there any training or awareness organizations that you would recommend for churches? Because one thing that you mentioned was a disability officer, but I don't know if we have one.
Yes, good question. So back in 2025, I think it was, the General Conference in the manual, we're talking now about Seventh-day Adventist churches, identified the importance of there being someone within every division. This is how, so the church is obviously divided up in different, you've got the local church, you've got the conferences, you've got the unions, and then you've got the divisions. Every division should have somebody who was responsible for what they call possibility ministries. You may have heard of possibility ministries, but actually it's disability ministries. And then that should be mirrored at the local level. So every church is encouraged to have someone who has that responsibility to, first of all, find out the needs in the church and to also provide training. Now, of course, as I said before, the church cannot provide everything, but it can be supported by what's available locally. And there are lots of organizations locally that you can tap into. And the disability coordinator, so I was the former disability coordinator for the South England Conference my term ended in 2020. And one of the things that I would always encourage the disability coordinators to do, because I provided their training, was to locally identify any organization that's close to them that they could invite in to provide training. So, for example, there's autism in London. There's Autism London. There's Carers UK, which is another really good organisation that can provide some support. There's Mind. I'm sure you would have shared quite a few of these organisations. Chi-Chi is part of this program. But yeah, so the role of the disability coordinator or possibility administrative leader would be to initially find out what the needs are in the church. What are some of the access needs? And there are two great barriers, I think, that a lot of churches might experience for ensuring that people with disabilities have a sense of belonging. And one can be the attitudes of some of the just as simple attitudes, and another could just be the environment or the building. So the idea is to provide some training around those areas to help the church. So, as an organization, ASNA, we provide training, but we also encourage churches to identify local. So one of the charities that I find for carers, as I said before, which is excellent. They've got a really good website. It's called Carers UK. And in fact, somebody alerted me to something a couple of days ago, which I should have sent you I'll send you the link later on, actually, Chi-Chi. And that Songs of Praise, apparently, BBC Songs of Praise actually just last week had a program that was geared specifically around carers. I must be honest, I haven't seen it fully. I saw a little bit of it, but that might be quite a really good program that I would suggest that people have a look at, because it talks there about carers, their role, what they're doing, and how faith has helped them on their journey.
The next one is, excuse me, how did you deal with feeling lonely or isolated even when you're constantly surrounded by responsibilities?
Yeah, lovely question. So, I think I kind of probably got rock bottom without realizing it. I really was at a place where I felt, because I was one of these people that wanted to do everything myself. Of course, it's not possible. You have to come to the place where you have to accept help. And I think by doing that, that really did make a major difference, by being able to accept help and to be willing to accept help really helped me on that in that space.
So, is
Yes.
somebody asking a question?
I think Chichi was
No,
about
go
to
for
read
it.
another one. Are you still there, Chichi? Oh, not Chichi,
Yeah.
sorry, Claudia. Claudia,
Yeah.
did you want to say something? No, she probably not. Were you about to read another question, Chichi?
Yes, I was. Okay, this one says, I feel like sometimes I don't know how to help or offer support to carers within the church during service. How
Mm,
can people offer help in a way that feels empowering rather than patronizing?
lovely, excellent question. Well, as I said before, one of the key things to do is to ask, Um, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking. I mean, even Jesus asked before he healed, didn't he? Just take some time to get to know the family and ask them, how can we better support you? For me, as a parent, what really helped me with my son, because you can imagine 24/7 at home with him, when I came to church, I had to be very intentional about finding somebody to help. And I wanted somebody who was around Matthew's age, because obviously I wanted him to feel that he also had friends. And so there was a young man that used to come and sort of, I called him like a befriender. And he used to come and take Matthew out for a walk. And so I was able to then stay in church and enjoy the service, and then he would come back. And that really came from him asking me, how can I help you, Sophia? And I said, what would be great is if you wouldn't mind just taking Matthew for a walk or just sitting with him for a while so that I can enjoy the service. And sometimes it is just about respite, but also spiritual life is very much affected. And I think maybe one of the things that one church did, which was excellent, was they decided to start a support group for carers in their church. They had the building, they had the carers that were there, and this became an evangelistic outreach as well, because carers in their community were invited along as well. And as a result of that, they would have, they just came and had a meal together, talked together, share some of the experiences, but also invited specialists to come in to talk about things like wills and trusts and how to navigate the statutory systems, which you can probably appreciate. And that was really, really helpful. But that's what that church wanted, and that worked for them. So I think there's something about, just taking some time to just maybe have a carers Zoom meeting where you ask all the carers to come together, and you just let's talk about how we can better support you. In ASNA, we have, as I said before, a monthly meeting called Hair to Hair. And the idea of that is for peer support, but also I think it actually morphed from being, sort of a drop-in center. People would just come and we would talk about some of the challenges, to carers saying, we really would benefit and we would like to have more structured seminar type things where we bring in specialists to give us some ideas as to how we can be better carers. Is that helpful? Whoever asked the question.
I hope so. Sister
Hope
Claudia,
so.
did you have something to?
Okay. We talk about the family, but what support we can give to the husband as well during these challenges? Because, as you said before, the focus mainly was on the child, and in many situations, many families, in a normal life situation, the husband have a tendency of being affected even when you have children. This is normal. So how we can support the husbands?
I love that question. And in fact, I should have taken some time to find it. There is actually a book that was written by a charity called Contact. They were called Contact to Family, but they're now just called Contact. And in the book, and in fact, my husband has written a chapter in this. In it talks about, it gives fathers an opportunity to talk about some of their experiences and what they are going through, and that then obviously provided an opportunity for that particular charity to provide a resource to support them. And also, as a charity, as we hold annual carers days or carers conferences, and the last one we had, we were very intentional about making it about fathers. where they could really talk about some of the challenges that they're experiencing, and they are many. There are many experiences. There's a lot of stress on the relationship. Some of them feel that it's their fault. There's something that they've done. So I think it's a really, really good question, and I think, but it needs to be intentional, because you're right. What will happen if you call for carers groups? You probably might just be the parents, the mothers that will come, or the females that will come. But I don't know if you have like a men's ministry, or you have an opportunity for there to be some opportunity for the fathers to come together. And they may not necessarily want to sit, and I mean, I'm not making any assumptions here, but every church is different, and everything will be different. It might just be that they want to sit and chat, or they might want to do something different. My husband set up something called men's ministry, where they together would go to people's homes and help with their gardening, and of course men can chat in that environment. So I think it's about finding out what will work for your community. But yes, it's an excellent question. Did you, Claudia, have any ideas yourself about what could be done? I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear from others as well, if there are other suggestions that people have around supporting carers.
Well, like what you said is quite interesting, very good. Like you said, in men ministry. And we can have like dads coming together, with children with disability.
Mm.
And they probably can run events together and support each other. They have a network of support as well as dads. And maybe they can even give little education talks, do different events, and let them know that life is still interesting despite we have children with disability. Life can still go on. We can still have fun, and even challenge each other family. You want the family, invite another family, do a showcase, different things, come up with different ideas,
Yeah.
as family.
Absolutely. I mean, as far as the church is concerned, some of the reasons why some families probably don't feel support is because the members just don't know how or know what to do to support them. There is the question of asking, but also just running. I don't know. Maybe if I can ask if it's possible. Of those of you who are here, it says that there are 12, so that must be 10 other people. Those of you who are here, can you just put in the chat maybe a 3 if you've got a disability or what's called possibility ministries leader in your church? And I can see this time. Is nobody putting anything up? No, surely there must be one. Okay. All right. Is that just because people are just away from their phones or their devices, or people genuinely don't? Okay.
I
All right.
don't think we do.
Okay.
Oh,
Let's see.
someone, Livy has said yes, we do.
Yeah. Which church is this? Fabulous. Good job. Excellent. If there is someone. The reason I ask that question is because one of the things that we find is that those who do have coordinators, they may contact us. And what we find ourselves doing is coming to churches. We find this is where we make the most impact at a local church. And one of the things that we do, Claudette, is to Claudia, sorry, did I get the name wrong?
Claudia.
Claudia, sorry, is to invite a family in that church to share their experiences with the church. And most churches find that so enlightening. And it gives them, not all families can do that, but when they feel comfortable to do that, it makes a huge difference to the way the church then, people talk about scales being removed from their eyes, having better understanding, knowing more. So, for example, my son Matthew, nobody would have known unless you asked me, or people would often come up to me, and if Matthew, my son, is sitting next to me, they'll come to me and they'll sort of ask me about Matthew. I said, well, just talk to him, and they're always surprised at the fact that Matthew does engage. He'll put his hand out, he'll shake your hand, and he'll take your hand to his nose to smell you so that he can get a sense of who you are. He'll touch your wrist for some unknown reason. He'll try to touch your hair so that he can actually map you to find out who you are. And in that way, you get to know him. And that opens people's eyes to, oh, I didn't know about that about Matthew. And I think if families are given that opportunity to share as well, I think you tend to find that, it just provides opportunities for better support, shall we say. And I talk about creating places of belonging so that everybody feels that they have a place in ministry. And I should say, care is one thing, but we need to move from caring to what we call co-laborers. I don't know if you've heard of this Again, I quite like models, as you can probably tell, and it's called the 5 stages to the 5 stages of changing attitudes, people with learning disabilities. And it talks about the first stage being pity, no, before pity actually is ignorance. If you just have never known or engaged with people with disabilities at all, then you are at the stage of ignorance, and you kind of feel that there's nothing that people with disabilities can do or can be involved in church life. They're not even in our church. We don't see them because, I remember once speaking to a pastor saying, "Oh, can we come and do a program in your church?" And he said, "Oh no, we don't need this because we have nobody in our church with disability." But when you look at it, the number of people that there are in our communities with disability. So there is that stage of ignorance. And then the more you engage, the more you understand, you start to, move to the next stage, which is that of pity, which I think is, for me, the most devastating phase, when people kind of look at you, or look at your child, or look at your son or your wife, and you think, "Oh, poor you." Pity is a really difficult stage to be at. But the more you begin to engage, the more you begin to understand, the more your eyes are better opened, the more you appreciate, then you can move from a stage of pity to care. And that's the phase that I think a lot of us tend to kind of get stuck in. We want to help all the time. We want to be, there's nothing wrong with that. But we need to probably move along this sort of journey to from caring to befriending, becoming friends of people with additional needs. I mean, I could ask in the chat, who in this group has got a friend that has a learning disability? Now, it might be that you might know somebody, but I'm talking about real friendship. And once you begin to become a friend of someone with disability, you then move, and I'm talking now in the church context, to the appreciation that actually ministry can be done together. And it's not, me doing something for you, but people with disabilities can also be disciples and working in in ministry in the church. That's the phase we want to get to, that we see everybody, no matter our disability, everybody, has a part to play in the ministry of the church. I was excited to find that my son is a member of this Oxford SDA church, and he was baptized member of the SDA church. He kind of left home, shall we say, when he got to about age 21. We managed to find somewhere for him to be, because we really wanted him to have what we call circle of support now, when we Compass Medicine can do that for him. And Matthew goes to church every Sabbath. He goes to New World SDA Church, and what's quite interesting is he has what's called a 2-to-1. So he has two carers that take him to church every Sabbath. And one of these carers has renewed her faith. She had left, but because she comes every Sabbath with Matthew, she's hearing the message. So Matthew's being a disciple. He's taking people to church. This is a ministry. So once we begin to appreciate that we all have a part to play in ministry, suddenly we start to see that our church is enriched, our church is full, that people are blessed. Not only are they blessed by us caring, but we also can be blessed by working together. Yes.
Livy's put in the chat about, Portsmouth. They have tea and events with people from the community around people with disabilities, as well as old people.
Fabulous. Excellent. That's good news. There's a lot to be done, and it's a wonderful opportunity.
The next question here is, what would you say to carers who feel invisible or forgotten within their church community?
What would I say to them? I mean, if they feel invisible and they feel forgotten, often there may well be a reason for that. Maybe they are invisible and forgotten. And maybe there's something to do with, the church surrounding them. But I think also there are times when carers, especially if you don't take the time we talk about self-care, that you forget yourself. Let's put it that way. So one of the ways that you can start to become more present is to take time out, to desperately take some time out. Sometimes it's difficult, and I know, especially when it comes to trying to find somebody who looks after the person that you support. But there's going to be someone in your church community that can help you. I guarantee you. There will be somebody. And even if you can't find somebody in your church community, most statutory organizations have got support for you. There is care there. Often what tends to happen is there are some people who don't see themselves as carers, and so therefore they don't look for support. And they're, and I use the word suffering. Sometimes you can be suffering on your own, or like me, you might feel that you can do it all by yourself, but actually you cannot. You do need support. We were built in community. God didn't just make Adam, he made Adam and Eve because we desperately need each other. So what I'd say to that carer is let's look after yourself first. Find some time, find somebody hopefully who can be who can be a friend, can be your friend. I think also take time to look after yourself, to maybe do something different, so something creative, something that you might not necessarily done, because your mind can be totally focused on the person that you care for, which can create this. It's not imaginary, it definitely is the case where you feel you're all on your own on this journey. So I think take time for yourself, sort of step back. And I tend to find when I used to do that, it kind of gave me a boost when I was better, I think, at caring. And then also finding an opportunity where you can share what you have, because as a carer, you've got a lot of skills that you've developed. Try to find opportunities where you can actually share that. And I think maybe then, you'll see that firstly, you're not the only body experiencing this, and that can give you a sense that you're not on your own. That's probably what I would say to a carer.
Following on from that one was, what are some things that church members may unintentionally do that makes carers feel unseen or unsupported?
I think one of the key things that as I mentioned before, is this whole thing around pitying them. That might give you a sense that you're I mean, pity can have such a devastating effect. I know for us, people kind of look at you and think, oh, poor you. There isn't really anything that you're in such a bad. Be careful what I say, but it's a sense that it's almost there is nothing that can be done for your situation, which can be very, very difficult. And another thing that I think sometimes people experience, that I kind of mentioned in my presentation, is that there can be a sense that people unknowingly may make carers feel that there's something that they have done which caused them to be in that situation. Some sin that they've committed or something that they've done that's caused them. And I always ask them to just look at the power of John 9, where they ask, what's happened to this man? Why is he blind? What did he do? Did he do something wrong? And Jesus said, no. And I think you also look to the story of Job. We know that Job didn't really do anything wrong. He was blessed, and God really found him a righteous man, but yet he had all these experiences. So I think we do probably need to be careful how we engage spiritually with people with additional needs, or the families or the carers, and it can sometimes be I refer to it as church hurt. I think also maybe not taking the time to be intentional to seek out carers. That's one of the things that one of the carers in the survey wrote, that it was just like they were invisible in a sense. And that sometimes can just be, I mean, if we think about some of the words that come to mind when we think about belonging, what are some of the things that come to mind when we think about belonging? People always talk about things about being valued, being respected, feeling at home, etc. And I often say that one of the greatest things that can cause people to feel that they belong is when they're missed, when they're not there. You contact them and find out, where were you. So yeah. So I think I've kind of tried to suggest some positive things that we can do to support carers, and just love people. I think that's probably what I could really say. Really take some time to be intentional. I think that's probably what I should, give you. I like to always emphasize the importance of intentionality, because it's very easy to see somebody that is different to you, and to probably be more drawn to people that look like you, talk like you, work like you, but there has to be an intentional effort to with the love of God in your heart, you genuinely want to be a blessing to someone else, and therefore take the time to get to know people that are different to you, people that have diverse needs. And I think for me, when I see people really engaging Matthew intentionally, showing a sense of love, that works for me as a carer. I don't need to worry about anything else. So yeah.
Yeah. Was there a follow-up to that? I think so. Oh, I thought I saw someone unmute. The last one I had here from my chat is, what advice would you give to parents who are noticing signs that their child may have additional needs like autism and and are feeling overwhelmed in that in-between stage of uncertainty where they don't have a diagnosis but they are already struggling to cope?
Just befriend them. Honestly, this is not really, I don't really want to make this anything more than just taking time to get to know that family. Listen to them. You know, you may not be able yourself to do anything, but wait until they ask for help. There are lots and lots of organizations out there that can support them, especially in early diagnoses or waiting for early diagnoses. Um, I mean, I'd love to hear if anybody else has any other advice on that, because for me, when I think about my situation, it was great just having people. I remember when in fact, the very first couple of days that I was in hospital, and the pastor came, and you know what? He said nothing. He just sat there. He just was just there. Um, and he waited until I sort of offered a conversation. But it was wonderful. That was the best experience I could ever have had. I think everybody is different, really. There are organizations out there who can support, especially early diagnoses. I feel that as church members, what we can do ourselves is to take some time to be better educated ourselves. You know, just individual education. There's lots of charities websites out there that can give you lots of information around how to support families in this way. Um, but I don't know, Chichi. For me,
I
it's
think
just you go ahead.
sorry, I think this question was more for the parent in terms of relating to their child, and they haven't got a
Okay.
diagnosis, but they're still struggling with the symptoms of that diagnosis, and they're not sure how to cope with that emotionally.
Ah, I mean that's quite an interesting question.
Um,
I suppose. Does somebody want to say something?
You go ahead, and then I will say what I
No,
what
I'm interested to hear what you have to say, actually.
no, in a case, like that, some diagnoses are very difficult, and maybe you have them review from time to time, because sometimes not all diagnosis you can have immediately. But I know it will be challenging as well while the child may present it with these type of symptoms, and it can be very frustrating and very tiresome and debilitated, and as well can bring a bit of anxiety and anxiousness to the family or the person, the hero
Mm.
itself. But I just was thinking is that what can we do? Remember, we have medical support. We can continue seek advice, and as well, remember we have the spiritual aspect as well, and as well continue with other network of support. If you find yourself don't know what to do, what to cope, maybe speak to others who might have similar experience. Try to reach out to others. As I said, don't suffer in silence, because someone might having the same experience that you might be having as well, but they may not say it.
Mm.
But they might put you on to someone who have the similar experience, and someone might be able to give a recommendation. But in the meantime, don't give up. Just continue prayerfully and ask God to show you the right direction, or show them the right direction, and see what best care can be given until, because some children, they present with symptoms and eventually they grow it out, because I know children who people might think they had
Mm.
H hyperactive condition, and these children become good children eventually. So not
Mm.
everyone might be diagnosed with a disability, or they might they might be having presented with behavioral issue. But then, as I said, we just have to review it and continue asking God intervention as well to guide us to get the right treatment and the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thank you, Claudia, for that response. But I think that's a really good question, actually. And I must admit, I haven't really thought about it in a way I was even thinking about it from my own situation, but of course, my diagnosis was pretty quick for my son. But I think there is something. Oh, Donna's got a hand up. There is something there about um, it must be quite a difficult situation to be in because you're patiently waiting to see if there is going to be a diagnosis, but at the same time you still have this relationship that you have to to keep with your child. I think maybe it might be challenging, especially if it's around behaviors, but I don't know, would that change even after you have a diagnosis, how you relate to that child? Would that change any much? I mean, maybe it may bring about better understanding, but I think the love, the attention, etc. I don't know whether that would change. Donna, please don't put your hand down. Where are you?
I'm here. I'm here.
Let's hear
I
from
was just gonna comment to say, for me, I'm wary with some of these diagnoses being done quickly on our children.
you. Okay.
We have to be because from experience. Because people from our church here will know my children, and I have a son who who when he was at school was quite. He's not chatty, but vocal in terms of always answering questions and always out there, always quick to participate.
Mm.
And at one point, they were thinking that he had this hyperactive and trying to put him in a place of trying to get him a diagnosis. And I said, and I interrupted it because I know my child. I know, and we have been at home. Not that we disregard nobody with that, but we know because of how we nurture the children from here, from home, with this open speak and so on, speaking as family goes to school with it. And today he's fine. Nothing is wrong with him. And they tried, school tried. So, because at one time the teacher said he always comes into school with something in his hand. And that was a problem. He'll pick up something and he's always got something in his hand, but different things. And eventually he was looked at and he didn't have a problem. But
Okay.
they really was pushing for it at one of the schools. So how do we deal with situation like that?
I think Donna, I think Chichi has her hand up. The moderator has a hand up. I don't know if that was intentional at all. Chichi, did you want to
It
respond
was
at all?
I'll make the comment after. It wasn't in relation to that.
Okay, no. I think that's an interesting experience that you have, and I think it very it's gonna, as I said before, every single child is different, and so everybody's experience will be different. I think there is something about, it seems even more so now in society, that there seems to be a lot of diagnosing going on. It can be very helpful for some families because especially if there's a certain behavior that is quite, not that it's challenging for the parent to know how to work with that, and sometimes having some way of understanding why that is happening, and also it opens up doors for resources that you can access that can make life a lot easier for everybody, so that can sometimes be really important. But yeah, I think sometimes it can be, and your experience, was it Donna, is not unique, so yeah, so your experience will be different from somebody else's experience who somebody may have a child that is clearly showing some signs and symptoms that may relate to specific conditions. But thank you so much for sharing that. What was your comment, Gigi?
I was just gonna say I have a friend that like it took her ages to get an ADHD diagnosis. Um, and she was like misdiagnosed with dyslexia when she was younger, and then later on she started showing more traits. I think there's some sort of statistics about the diagnosing women with ADHD sometimes takes a lot longer. So she was waiting and waiting and waiting, and then her parents, they just started researching stuff anyway. just off of the basis of, okay, they think you potentially have this and we are still waiting, but what can we do in the meantime?
Okay.
So I was going to say to that person, obviously, I don't have kids, but maybe there's no harm in still looking what adaptations you can start in the house. Like I know it's a bit different, but like even for example, when I was struggling in a subject in school, as soon as like the teacher told my parents they were not having that. So it was like my mum would take the time to sit with me and okay, how do we work this around you? I remember my chemistry teacher told me at one point, she was like, she's going to fail this subject. And my mum refused. She was like, she just needs a different way of
Mm,
doing it. And
mm,
then when I did those adaptations, it did work for me.
mm.
So
Okay.
yeah.
That's a lovely answer. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Mm.
What did you say, Donna?
No, oh, sorry, I don't know. I'm unmuted. I was saying definitely.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think she's agreeing with you, Chichi. Absolutely. And I think that's because your mother had that in her to do that. And that's wonderful when parents do have that. I mean, I was very similar. I researched, I wanted to know, and it's interesting because they said that my son was never walk again. Not only is he walking again, he's running and all of these things. So, that does very much depend. And some families really, really, they're exhausted, they're tired, they may not be able to do those things. So I think there is something about support networks which are really, really important for everybody. Please don't be isolated, don't be on your own. Find a network that either has similar situations as you, or even just a network where because that's where you can share ideas, and that's as you were saying, Chichi, potentially if there is a parent who just doesn't know what to, they can probably get some ideas from other families. So yeah, don't be alone. I think is probably the key thing. Try as much as you can. And I know within our cultures, specifically in some African Caribbean cultures, there is this tendency to hide away and to feel that this doesn't exist, but please don't be on your own. Are we okay
The
for time?
next one, what would you say to a mother who is overwhelmed of being a mother and feels like giving up?
Yeah, don't give up. Yeah, you need a break. That's what you need. You genuinely need a break. Um, I can't stress that enough, especially if she's overwhelmed. And I'm assuming it's a mother who's overwhelmed of being a mother and feels that. So we're talking about any mother now, not necessarily a mother who has a child
Every
with
mother.
disability. Every mother, yeah. And I say the same thing to you. You need space for you. um you know Sometimes it's very difficult to be able to find that because maybe you're worried about how you're true, but it's really important. Self-care is so key. It really is. The Bible talks about loving others as you love yourself. If you need to learn to love yourself, and that involves taking some time out, honestly, I really do feel that that would be the best for you. And I think there are some, if we're just talking, bring it back to the church context, there are some really good opportunities for certain departments. And I think women's ministries is brilliant, or should be, well, can be brilliant at that. I know within our church, I'm women's ministries director, and I'm so aware of this. And we always try to find time. I mean, not everybody likes going to a spa, but I will take the women out for a spa, just to be on their own and, take some time to get to know, so to re-engage with yourself, who you are, and to take time with God. And I don't just say this glibly, I mean it quite intentionally. He can give you more strength than you could ever imagine. Create that space every day. Find the time as much as you can every day, whichever works for you, to just to reconnect with yourself, but most of all to reconnect with your maker. And also find time with your friends. Chichi, I'm sure you have an answer to that. You may not be a mother, but I'm sure you have an answer to that. What could a mother who's overwhelmed with being a mother and feels like giving up, what can you say to her? Don't give up.
Well, it's easier said than done to say don't give up. But I think I
Absolutely.
agree with what you said. When I am feeling overwhelmed, etc., I try and well, I'm quite bad with it actually. I normally just wait until it gets to like the end
Okay.
result. But
Okay.
even then I try and communicate as best as I can with like if people are depending on me, I say, listen, like my capacity is very low. I need to
Mm.
be with myself right now. And then also I try and force as much as I can self-care into my day, even if it's just like, oh, this morning I'm going to do a face mask for 5 minutes. listen to a podcast just while adding that to my routine. I try and force it. I agree
Absolutely.
with the friends and community. That's a good kind of distraction from worries sometimes, but then also sometimes you need that joy to uplift you. And then sometimes, if you are struggling to look up that Bible podcast or you're struggling to read the Bible yourself, you can
Mm,
study with friends, you can converse with friends about God, you can go
absolutely.
in nature and look at what God has created, for example, and have that practical, let God shine through your friends in that way, or reach out
Absolutely.
to your friends for support. I know it's difficult because sometimes as I said, I hate asking for help.
Mm.
So sometimes it is hard to actually say to your friend like, "Hey, can you?" or "Hey, can you?" But I'm sure like close friends would be very willing to even just for an hour or something, take the kids to the park or something on your behalf while you just have a bubble bath, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you know, Chichi, is it might not be close friends. We living in a community where we are blessed. We've got church family. They've got people out there who constantly telling you they've got nobody. And we as a church, people must be able to, if they're in, presume this question is coming from somebody within our group here. If they feel overwhelmed, they should be in a place or in a position where they can reach out to one of us. Let's say people know I don't work on Sunday or I'm free on a Saturday evening. Sister D, are you all right? Could you have the kids for a couple of hours for me, as you say, while I have a bubble bath? You know? But I've been there and I know what it's like when you think this person promise, yes, 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 I'll have the kids anytime, and that one day you ask, you've got a million excuses that it's not possible, you know. But we have to be our each other's keeper, and we are lacking this. I work with a lot of Muslim, and when I tell you they have got society and a community, we are really lacking, and we need to take things away from those people. We can learn things, and we can be of each other's keeper. So that when people at mothers at some point, at every point in their life, feel overwhelmed, even sometimes a crying baby could make you feel overwhelmed. Baby that crying, you do everything and then I stop crying. You don't know what else to do. And and sometimes it's just somebody to take them for a walk up the road or something, you know. So we need to get to that place.
Mm.
I feel
That's
like
that's
sometimes, sorry, it's a bit easier said than done though to ask for help. Like sometimes it really is a struggle for some people to ask other people. So maybe as a community, we can get a bit better at offering
yes.
help to those people, or even just checking in a bit more on
Mm.
those people.
Yeah. I
Well,
think that's a really
and,
good point.
and you
Yeah.
know what? I have been there, guilty, where people offer, but I feel like it's my responsibility. And I refuse offers. In this country where we've got nobody. And I
Mm.
refuse.
Mm.
But even though I refuse, I put myself under so much pressure. But I'd rather to go undergo the pressure than accepting a bit of help.
Mm.
But I've been there. I know what it feels like, and it's not because I've done it. Make others need to put themselves through it. Because if you don't have that supportive, like a supportive partner, it could be very hard.
Mm. I think it's a really Donna makes some really good points. And I think as do you as well, Gigi. And I think, I mean, when I look closely at the question, what would you say to a mother who's overwhelmed of being a mother, and feels like giving up? And I think I suppose in a sense it can sometimes feel like don't get me wrong when I say like you're trapped almost in a way of being a mother. And I think that often tends to happen. I feel, I know in my situation, if you yourself are physically really low, so I think if it's possible, we talked about self-care, and we talk about the New Start. You've heard about the New Start, the nutrition, the exercise, the water, as much as you can, to try to maybe connect with someone who can, almost be like an accountability partner, where you take time to really look after yourself where you can. And the difficulty about asking for help, I think, has got a lot to do with, again, I think it has a cultural connection as well. Um, But I think it is very it can be, like you say, you wait till you rock bottom before you ask for help. But I think if you are in a network, you are in a community, it probably is easier because you see, because sometimes you kind of feel that you're the only one experiencing this. But if you see other people, talk to people that are going through the same thing, it might be easier then for you to say, well, look, can we exchange help kind of thing, really? And it's sort of like in that environment. But it's quite an important question. I don't know whether you have uh in your do you have a department or a sort of women's ministries department, or yeah, and I don't know if it's something maybe they could probably take on to see um to be quite intentional, use the word intentional, about how we support mothers in a better way, because it can be quite difficult. Thank you so much for that question.
So I used to be part of the women ministry committee a couple years ago. And we
Okay.
did had a program in our program plan where we give mothers like respites
Oh,
and identify other families. We did plan it for on a Sundays. So every so much Sundays we give parents, not only mothers, the couple a break. It was part of our on our agenda. When it was discussed further, there were a lot of questions in terms of getting these children in other people's house, and a lot of things came up, and to avoid all the concerns that was raised, it was dropped.
mm,
It never went any further than the discussion.
mm. So, maybe there's something about us making an assumption that this is a need in your church community. Maybe some sort of needs assessment could help to establish what some of the challenges might be. And yeah, there's always going to be some barriers, aren't they? But um, are they always insurmountable? I don't know. Maybe it's something that can be revisited. Um, do you have as a result of this excellent project, I think there's probably a lot of things that you've kind of identified and noted as to how you can move them forward. I know in our church community, we identified that there was a real need for I think one of the things that one of the women said was the younger women especially said that they felt that there was a disconnect between the generations. That young women didn't feel connected very much to the older women, and so we made an intentional effort to bring them together. And it was quite lovely seeing how there was almost what we identified was need for like a mentoring system, simply. And so you kind of matched up a younger woman to an older lady in the church, and that has formed some really great friendships and relationships. So yeah, there are things that we can probably try to implement. It'd be interesting to know whether the person who asked that question, whether there's anything else that's come up from the conversations, any other suggestions that they might have themselves, or they know people have experienced. It'd be quite good to hear if anyone does have. I think it's important to not ignore it, really. Maybe.
I asked the question and
Oh, oh, hi.
hi. It's a bit of a personal one as well because I struggle with mental health and it's
Okay.
been affecting me a lot recently. And I've been having a lot of mom guilt and like you said, feeling trapped. Um, if I could take things back, I don't think I would have had the children that I have now when
Mm,
I've had them, especially without the support of a partner. There's a lot of people in my community that are trying to help, but I just feel a lot of guilt in the fact that I'm feeling like I don't have as much energy to engage with the children as I used to when they were younger.
mm, mm,
Um, and there's a lot of it, like when you were mentioning about the suicidal thoughts and things, that's places I've been. And people always say, oh, what about the kids? But sometimes they are part of the stress that is getting on top of you. But um, like Sister Donna said, I feel like it's my responsibility. I had the kids. It wasn't anyone else. So it's on me that I need to, get my, I don't know, ideas together and get moving and do stuff. But even the thing about going to God, sometimes I don't have the capacity for that. I feel like I
Yeah.
do need to talk it out.
Absolutely.
Got a counselor, but sometimes my words are stuck in my mouth and I just have this overwhelming pressure inside. And it's just hard sometimes.
Well, firstly, can I just respond quickly, Gigi? Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I don't want to put myself in any position of being a counselor because I'm not. But I do feel that sometimes, it's there may well be opportunities for you maybe to to speak to someone. Did you say that you're seeing counselor? Did I hear her say that? Did
Yeah.
I? Yeah, good. So I think that's a really good place to be. And I just wondered whether there might be other opportunities for you to really to be able to communicate your feelings and your expressions. I think that's one of the key things as I understand it. So thank you so much for sharing, Eunice, and I know the church will see how they can better support you in that.
And another thing too is important is that mental health, each and everyone may have mental issues some way or the other. It might affect us differently
Yeah.
because it can be different reason people suffer mental health. And mental health used to be seen as a stigma, but now we have to see it in a way how we can manage best, how best we can manage, how best we can support, identifying the need instead of like condemning individual or trying to judge situation. And that's the thing we have to try and even ask God intervention, how we to deal with it, even though we know we have medication as well. But God has put people in our lives, medical personnel, counselors, these are very helpful adaptation. And like we have the church community. And I must say this, is that, I think Dana mentioned it already as well. We have a church, and maybe this session will help us more now to be better understanding how to deal with others and to see how we can support each other, more because nothing's impossible with God. Because sometimes we might have been weak with the way how we responded in time, but then God can show us way and mean how we can deal with supporting each other. We have a sister even not well, either mentally, whatever it is. Our main aim and objective is not to find out why she's mentally ill. The objective is how can we support, how we can show love, how we can, you know, have this connective network to support this individual and the family. Let them have a sense of belonging, that they know even though that they're not well, that they are belong to us. And when they know that they have a sense of belonging, that's very great. But only God can put that in us, that we can extend that love.
Sister, that was that Sister Claudie.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You have such wonderful words of wisdom, and I think if your church is if you are an example of the membership of your church, then I think Eunice, you're in a good place. I think there is something about recognizing that we all need each other, but also we also need to know when to seek professional help. And I think you've had some fantastic presenters on this project, Chichi. I think there's a Dee spoke earlier, if I remember, and she's part of the church counselling service. It's always very good if somebody falls down and break a leg. I'm sure everybody talks about this. If you fall down, break a leg, or you break your arm, there's blood spilling, you rush them to the emergency, and you can deal with it. It's not a big deal. But when people do have challenges with their emotions, their mental status, there seems to always be some kind of stigma attached to it. I don't understand or know why, but I think again has its cultural leanings. But there is definitely help around, and please don't try to avoid suffering alone. I think you're not alone. There are others, similar situation to you, and you can be supported.
Mm. I think one thing that was mentioned was like the guilt of kind of like, oh, this was my decision, etc. And like maybe it shouldn't impact me as much. But in Elder Melvin's talk specifically, he talked about how one, the spectrum of mental health is different, and then two, everyone is affected differently. So you shouldn't compare yourself to like somebody else who's a mother or etc. If it's impacting you and it is impacting you severely, then that
Mm,
is something that you need to take into consideration of like how are we going to approach this if you need to make a plan with someone else. Because sometimes it's hard to like sit and think like what's the first steps that I should do.
mm.
Sometimes we need to like break things down into bigger goals and smaller goals and sit with someone else and do it. So maybe that could be a starting point. I'm not sure.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. Most certainly. Most certainly. Were there any other questions? I couldn't see any.
I can't see any more in the chat unless anyone else had any more comments. If not, then I would like to thank you again, Sophia, for your presentation. I think it was really insightful and we've learned a lot today from this presentation.
Yeah,
I,
I
for one, am
really
grateful that we've been here for it.
thank you. Enjoyed being with
Before we
you.
move on to our next part, I will say tomorrow, I'm not sure who in here is planning on joining tomorrow. It will be with Stephen White, and he's going to do on hope is more contagious than suicide. So that one I will give a trigger warning now, and when the email comes out, there'll be a trigger warning. That one is heavily about that topic. But it is going to be interesting. It's about the idea that if we spread hope more as a church, will that become um, kind of beneficial in kind of reducing suicide rates, or how does that work? We will be moving on to the journaling. If you want to sit and journal, if you want to just sit and listen to the songs and reflect quietly, if you want to sit and pray, then that's fine. If you want to leave, that's also fine. But I will ask, Eunice, Sarah, are you in a position to pray right now? To do our
Yeah.
closing prayer?
Yeah, we can pray. Okay, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for the time and the space that you've given us today as a people to be able to sit, to listen, to learn, to gain further insights and understanding of what carers are going through that are looking after children, spouses, and others that have extra needs. We have learnt a lot and we have had a great discussion. I pray that our discussions will not just end here, that we may take these ideas and suggestions into our communities to reach out and help those around us who are carers for people with extra needs. Um, to see them as God's children and as much human and a part of society as we are. Help us to be more inclusive and also to further educate ourselves to be able to live better with those around us that are not like us and those around us who are supporting those with extra needs. I thank you so much for our presenter today. I pray that you may continue blessing her in her ministry and with her family. She's a great testament to what you can do through someone who's caring for others. She did not just stop at caring for her son, but she reached out to others who are going through the same experiences for her support and also to support others around her. I pray that you may continue giving her strength as she continues to do this as she continues to work in the Women's Ministries Department as well. I pray for our larger church community that we may be more inclusive and aware of those around us that we're worshipping with and the needs that they may have and the support that we can give them. I pray that if anything has come up for anyone that is difficult, that we may find the strength to reach out to those necessary to get the help that we need. The emphasis has been made that we're a community. No one is to stand alone. You made us for each other so that we can support one another through life. And I thank you for this. Thank you for the church family. Thank you for the love that is within us. And I pray that you may heal those who may have been wounded in caring for others, not getting understanding, or any other church hurts that have happened due to a lack of understanding, people trying to help and not getting the support that they need to help others. I pray that you may help us to just put love at the forefront of everything that we do, for ourselves and also for those around us. I thank you for all these things. In Jesus' name I pray.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen.